very much, Mark. Flashed up there a couple of pictures I thought were quite interesting. Somebody sent them, I hadn't seen them for years, but I tried to myself in 1986 after I had that time with the motorbike. And sometimes I do look at that again, particularly when things are not going so well. You think, well, if you're a bit worried about a sore Achilles or a bad back or a dodgy knee, then you can have a look at these a couple of other images that just to remind yourself the road you've been on and how it's possible for everybody to get back. Anyway, that's a slide there. Okay, in terms of okay, I want to sort of focus in on really on sort of four main things. What do I see the role of cross-country is in the context of athletics as a whole? How do you plan for success? It doesn't just happen, you have to plan for it. We touched a bit on that earlier. What are some of the success factors for progression as an athlete, from a junior to a senior, and from a senior as a club athlete to a county athlete, and a Scottish international athlete to success in the UK platform and beyond? And I suppose why I keep coming back from war, why we're still here, why we've lasted as long as we have, some of the factors that have influenced these things, some things that are transferable, other things that are just unique to ourselves. What motivates us to stay in the sport for as long as we have. And obviously, if people can pick up one or two tidbits or pieces of information that are useful to them, then all the better. Okay, in terms of the role of cross-country, well, I mean, essentially for me, when Tamara sort of said to me, think about cross-country and the context of cross-country within athletics as a whole, and to be absolutely honest, I see cross-country as something that's self-contained. I really see it as the only goal of the winter. Now, I know that might not be the same for everybody, and people might be thinking beyond that, but for me, cross-country is an end in itself. And I think having a mental view of cross-country being an end in itself doesn't cause any issues in terms of what you might do with the rest of the year. The only potential exception to that might be in the context of marathon training and racing, and particularly when the key races are. But for me, I don't focus on road races. And I don't necessarily think about I think about the whole year and what I'm planning for the whole year. But as part of the first step in all of what you do for the whole year is to have a successful cross-country season. Whether that's the track, whether it's the marathon, or whether that's the mountains. To me, the foundations of success in all athletics disciplines in an endurance field is cross-country. So therefore, mentally, I have the attitude that it's an end into itself. When I'm trying to peak for the UK trial or the national, whatever I'm trying to peak, I'm not trying to think, oh, this is my first peak and my second peak will be at the end of the summer. And that is something that can happen and will happen. But for me, it's the mental attitude is it's an end in itself, because I know that it complements what I might want to do for the rest of the year. So I don't see cross-country as a way to improve my track or a way to improve my mountain running, etc. etc. I know that will happen automatically, but to me it's the foundation of our success. There's probably been a move away from that in more recent years, and it's maybe the nature of the type of runner that I am, as a sort of endurance-based, sort of longer distance runner. The cross-country naturally suits me, and it might not necessarily doesn't always suit other people. When I was a junior, I talked to Jim about the World Cross-Country team in New York. We had a chap in it called Alistair Curry, who's the key player in Jog Scotland. But Alistair was an international class 1500 metre runner, and he used cross-country. He used cross-country as a building block for the summer. But by the same token, I think when he wanted to peak or get his best out of himself in a particular key race in cross-country, then he still viewed it as that. So to me, it's a self-contained aspect of the sport, and it complements other things that you want to do. Target races are as I say, that's your peak and that's it. No adjustment needed based on certain plans. And I think that the winter season, historically in Scotland and the rest of the UK, has facilitated that, because you have more of a structure to the winter season, and it allows you, and actually it is one of the reasons why people stay in the sport for a longer period of time, because that structure is there and there are so many different levels of competition, whereas on the track, and you know, to a less extent the road, particularly in terms of competition opportunities, you don't have that self-contained structure where people can compete at the appropriate level. We have the tradition of the relay season, early doors, then you have the counties championships, district championships, national championships, etc. On the summer, on the track, things move around, they vary depending on when the major championships are, and therefore the national championships change, etc., etc. So you've got a much looser structure, so it's much more difficult to navigate your way through the process. Okay. So that's my view of cross-country. When I go into a cross-country season, I see it as an end to itself, but I know automatically it will complement what I want to do for the rest of the year. I'm not saying it's the only thing I want to do for the year, it's not, but I know it's during the winter, that's my key target. And obviously as part of that then you need to then look at how you plan, and this kind of technical term of periodisation, bringing yourself to a peak performance, and we talked about some of the adaptations to training that you would do in order to get there. But at the start of the year you need to sit back and think about the targets, and think about what are your key races, what's your target race, what race are you going to use in order to build yourself to that target, and then have a focus. The point about talking to yourself in training, when Chris talked about that, once you've got your target race in your mind, and you talk to yourself about that target race in training on an ongoing basis. Okay? But periodisation and peaking is something that's challenging. Sometimes you're not sure why you're running well at certain points and not so well at other points, and you have to think your way through what you're doing in order to bring yourself to that peak position. No one is better at doing that than Chris, if I'm being honest. You know, in terms of the experience I've had, you know, I think it's fair to say I've probably been more consistently fitter during the season, and can be reasonably good at bringing myself to the peak for the key points. But in terms of moving on that journey from the start of the season, you're not particularly fit, through to hitting your peak, then particularly in the British trial, then that was something. And quite a few times I've beaten Chris at the national and had the result overturned a couple of weeks later in the British trial. So you know, obviously we'll see what Chris says about that. But you know, I think, and we've talked about some of the things that we do. I think it is about focus. It's about focus, and maybe I was guilty of maybe over focusing on maybe the national and you know, and not so much on the British trial. Latterly, I think it changed that. But you know, I think once you've got the right focus and the right target, then you're there. And obviously you need to plan an appropriate race schedule in order to bring yourself to that peak. So it's not just about I'll just race when I feel I need to race, or when somebody phones up and gives me the opportunity. You need to think your way through that. You need to adapt it to some extent, because opportunities do appear during the season, particularly as you're progressing as an athlete and beginning to get a bit of a name for yourself. Then opportunities start appearing. But I think you have to have that framework in place, and you have to be single-minded once you've got it in place. Again, it's that point of being a bit selfish, a bit kind of stubborn in relation to that. These are my targets. This is what we do, and you know, don't knock me off that, because this is my plan. So here's an example of a kind of race planning approach that worked well for me, and it is based on the kind of type of structure that we have in Scotland. It's kind of remained roughly in place for the last 30-40 years, roughly the same. For me, in terms of race plan, October and November I would run relays every week. I would start off the season with the Kilbarchan relays at the end of September, and I would race do the relays, usually every week, right the way through to the national relays. So I would run the Renfrewshires, the West District, the national relays, and I would use these as training, really. I wouldn't worry too much about, obviously, I would want to be as competitive as I can be, and I would want to do well, and I would enjoy that. It's quite refreshing at that point in the year. The pressure's not quite there. You know, you want to do well for your club, and there's a responsibility for that. But you know, it's not your peak time, so there's not the kind of mental strain of having to know that this is the race you're going to be judged on and such like. So I would use these as training. And that would culminate usually in the old days. I used to run the Glasgow University Road Race and then the Edinburgh to Glasgow Relay, and that would be the end of that kind of period of about maybe 7 or 8, maybe even more, but 7 or 8 weekends of doing that. A lot of that before that would be the short relays. Okay. Then early December, I would look for 1 or 2 cross-country races. Okay, so I would look for 1 or 2 good quality cross-country races. Then I would take a period, usually mid-December to the beginning of January, maybe mid-January, depending on when the Mollusk sort of International was. Whatever. I would take a period of not racing, and it would be what I would call my conversion phase, and that's where I would focus on doing some hill work. So the Saturday session would always be a hill session, and I would focus on that, you know, doing hill work specifically for a month. And then I would come out the other end in phase 2, which is the kind of business end of the season. Okay, that's when I'm looking to see what Chris and Tommy are doing. You know, mid-January to mid-February, I would probably do a couple of 2 or 3 races. And then mid-February to March would be the championship season. So that would be Scottish, UK, and if you did well, the Worlds. Okay, so that would be how I would approach the season. So you're talking about 3, 4, 5, about 6, 7, between 6 and 8 races, cross-country races in a season is what I would look for. And then obviously all the stuff before that, the relays and the road races would be part of the training. Okay, so that sort of structure has tended to work well with me, and I've always felt I performed better mid-January, mid-February than what I was doing early December. You know, and even just psychologically, mentally, having that kind of short break where you're focused on the training, you're thinking about yourself getting better, and then when you're back into the business end of the season, you know you're in shape to perform well. So that's race planning for cross country. I would say, in terms of where that sits within the whole year, well, my background was very much cross-country in the winter, track in the summer. That was the kind of, you know, typical West Scotland type athletic club background, you know, where that would be the key focus. And certainly in the first few years, that's what I was doing. It was cross-country in the winter, then the focus in the summer would be track. And I had particularly early in my career quite a lot of success in the track, up to the point where I broke my leg. I had quite a lot of success on the track, but to me, cross-country very much complemented the track. Just very briefly, in terms of the track, in terms of the base routine for track, it would be a wee bit different. It would be normally 2 track sessions, a Monday and a Wednesday, possibly a set of 150s on a Thursday. You know, that would be the sort of key focus here, and another track session on the Saturday. So I would do maybe 3, sometimes even 4 sessions on the track if I was aiming for the track. Okay. In the latter part of my career, a bit like, you know, Chris was talking about earlier, in the latter part of the career, in some ways I wish I'd done it a bit earlier, but then maybe I wouldn't have been able to deal with it a bit earlier, because it is a hard thing to do. I did get involved in mountain running, and I was lucky enough to finish in the top 10 in the World Mountain Running Championship, World or European Mountain Running Championship 6 times, and that was both there since the uphill only and the up and down. I was 4th in the uphill only, and my best position in the up and down was 7th. That was actually here in Edinburgh when we won the team silver. And also I won the European silver with Chris as part of the uphill only European competition. So, and I'm also lucky enough to win some of the Grand Prix races as part of that circuit. For me, that was a good way of remaining competitive at the latter stage of my career and giving me a bit of a new challenge. And also it's a good way to see the world as well. You know, because spending the summer in the Alps racing and training at altitude, etc., is quite a pleasant way to keep developing your athletic journey. So I had to think about how do I fit cross-country, track, and now mountain running in the process. Okay, so I actually developed a new approach, which was this, which was in phase 1 was the winter, which was the cross-country season. And then phase 2, I did a short early spring track season. I would normally do a few track races up until usually the district, or potentially or potentially the national championship, depending when it was. You know, sometimes around the 10,000 another point in the year, and I was lucky enough to win that a few times as well. But that tended to be the kind of approach up to the kind of district or Scottish. I would do track, and my aim then was to try and run a quick 5k. I knew that if I could run a quick 5k, I would be able to make a big impact on the mountain running season. Okay. So in '95, for example, we ran district 5k championships. Chris won it in 13:59. I was second in 14 dead, and the late Eddie Callum was third in 14:5. We had Chalky White, we had Billy Coyle. We had quite a few people take 2 laps each, piling on the pace, and then fighting it out in the last lap or so between ourselves, and that was pre-arranged. But for me, doing that and getting the confidence of having that speed, I knew again. I did recognise probably wasn't quick enough to make a significant impact at top world level on the track, but I know if I could maximise the speed, my natural speed strength to weight ratio. I was always good at running on the hills. The steeper the better. I know that if I had the leg speed, then I could translate that into mountain running and get a degree of success either on the Grand Prix circuit or the Champion circuit in terms of mountain running. So again, you had to think your way through what these challenges are. But I also had the classic phase 1 cross country, phase 2 track, road races. I did get the UK vest at the road to go with my the other ones, and ran one of the American relays, the World Road Relay Championships. But I tended not to over-focus on road races or road racing. It tended to be something that I did as part of my journey towards other targets. So, for example, the winter I used to always run the Glasgow University road race, and sometimes I would run occasional races, road races as part of the build-up to the track. Or obviously 10k races at the end of the cross-country season, etc. But they tended not to be something that I would over-fixate on. Usually, I think it's only probably possible to get 2 major peaks in a year. That's my kind of view. And in the context of what I've got here, I think the major peak there would be the winter cross-country, and in this particular case would be the mountain running. If we cut out the mountain running and just the track, it would obviously be the national or international championships in the context of the okay, so obviously one of the key points about cross-country running and racing and endurance running and racing is progression, and it's about creating the environment where you can be successful as you progress as a junior athlete to a senior athlete, and then as a senior athlete from club level to county level to national level to international level. And I think that is a challenge that some people can get to a particular level and stick, and it's how do you get to the next level is now I don't know if there's any magic formula for this. I don't think there is, but there's a number of key things that for me seem to help. One is to be able to manage the transition points. So when you transition, by transition points I mean when things change in your life, either through age or through employment or education or whatever. So when I went to university, and then when I started university, that's a transition point. When I finished university, that's a transition point. When you go into employment, that's a transition point. I wasn't in the era when people worked even part-time, people worked full-time. I had a family, Chris had a family. We were both winning big races or running big races when we had other commitments and family commitments. To me, it's been able to manage those transition points, and the key thing about that is to be a bit selfish and to very quickly settle into your base routine and not let the transition points affect your base routine. And there has to be some sacrifices. I mean, I did an accountancy degree at Glasgow University. I was thinking, well, I'll work as a practicing accountant, and I wasn't quite sure that was the right path to go anyway professionally. So I did another degree. I did a master's degree after I finished to continue my running, because I'd missed a bit of time when I busted my leg. And then I then went into education, and I went into education because I wanted to go into education. I taught in the college sector for a number of years, but it also gave me the stability to actually keep and develop my base routine, and it didn't allow me. I didn't maybe have the same challenges as Chris had. I had challenges in the context of family and employment and dealing with promoted posts and all that sort of thing. But I was able to maintain that base routine around these transition points. I think it's important in terms of progression that you always create as much of a positive environment as you can, that you always train with like-minded people. when I went to university, I was very much socialised with other athletes, but we did socialise, we did let our hair down, we did have a good time, but you did it in the context with people who were like-minded, so they understood really what you were about, and when you needed to turn things on and off, and so on. And I think that was quite positive. I think having a strong club background is something that we all three of us probably value, and I think that has helped, as a stable sounding, a stable base, a platform to go back to and use in terms of your then moving forward. And all of that, again, it's this point of being single-minded, mentally being really focused on what you want to do. A very important point is to look at progressively increasing the competitive challenge, and I think in the winter, in the context of cross-country, we do have there's club races, and it's been interesting in terms of my own journey. There's club races, there's county races, there's national races, there's UK international races, and then there's world type races. And of course I started off again doing club races and doing county championships, then district championships and national championships. Then decided that I needed to put myself in the line in terms of the UK type challenging races. I was lucky enough in the Old Scottish Cross Country Union to get some international competition opportunities, particularly when people like Nat Muir, etc. maybe couldn't make a race. So I ran in the San Sebastian Cross Country, I ran the 5 Hills Cross Country, really all the big classic races. There was a World Cross Grand Prix for a while. I don't know if it's still going, but there was a World Cross Grand Prix. And I managed to get on the coattails of that and for a few seasons running these races. So for quite a while I actually the only race I ran, the only race beyond those relays I talked about earlier, once I got into the actual racing scenario, so once I got into the early December, the only races I didn't run any races in Scotland until the national. So I either ran international races, or national standard races, like in the new Grand Prix when it first started, the Reebok Grand Prix was then, etc. Then obviously that's and really I did get my backside kicked a few times in some of these races, but you hang in there, and you expose yourself to that competition, and you gradually get there. And it helped because there was other people in Scotland capable, around about the same standard, capable of doing these things. So you did have that mental thing. Is look, if I'm not doing this, then I'm going to get beat by these, I'm going to get beat by Tommy and Chris, So essentially that spurred you on as well. But I think exposing yourself to that type and level of competition is really a key thing. And then the first mile of the Scottish National is relatively straightforward, because if you're used to running these kind of international standard cross-country races, and then suddenly you're in a domestic race, the first mile or so is relatively straightforward, your confidence grows, you're really narrowing it down to the key people you need to in order to win. So I think that's really important. And I think the other thing is you can't, it's not just, you have to listen and pick up information and think about what other people do, and think about what bits are useful for you, try things out, what bits are maybe not useful for you, and sort of try and pull that into your own programme. And that's where the coach-athlete relationship has to evolve. You can't stay in a directive relationship for the whole of your athletic career. You need to start challenging and discussing, and the coaches and athletes relationship has to evolve and change as you progress through. Okay, so why have we done it for so long? Maybe because we're a bit crazy, and got nothing else better to do. That may be one way of looking at it. There's a number of factors I think that are key to longevity in the sport. I think first of all, the intrinsic enjoyment of running is important. I mean, there are a lot of people, particularly in age group races, who are good because who run because they're good, and they run because they're good and they're successful. But that it's because they are good and talented that they're doing it, not necessarily that they like the sport, they like the. And I think to survive in the sport, you need to have an intrinsic enjoyment of running itself. I mean, I do enjoy going out on a Sunday and getting lost in the hills, and just going running if I can. I think we thrive in competition. And I think that's, you know, as I say, I went up to those international level competition, and I've come back down from international to national to county and now to club. You know, so it's I've gone the full circle. But irrespective of that, I enjoy the competition. You know, it's the feeling of running well and beating your targets, and you know, that's kind of satisfaction, if you like. You can't really beat it. So and some people don't like competition, but I think myself, Tommy and Chris all did thrive on it. You know, if you beat Chris or if you beat Tommy, it wasn't because you truly did beat them. It wasn't that because the mental thing was never an issue with the two of them, because you knew they were very strong mentally. You know, so it wasn't like, oh, they're better than me, but I've got a stronger mental attitude. You know, if you beat them, you truly beat them, and that's probably why we never consistently beat. Chris never consistently beat me, or vice versa, and similarly with Tommy, because the mental thing was put to one side. It was purely about, you know, are we better on the day, you know, and let's come back for more if we're not. I think having a club supportive environment is important. And I mentioned strong rivals. I think that's key as well. A stable work-home life, I think that's important. Again, it's about managing the transition points. But if you've got, you know, if you are constantly changing, then it makes it more challenging. But you know, there are, if you're working full time or you work part time or whatever, there's always opportunities to train. You know, you can get up in the morning. I get up in the morning now when I can, and we've got a dog now. So my excuse is I'll take the dog out for a walk every morning. But at the same time, I'll maybe have run a few miles, you know, while I'm doing that. So you have to work around your work-home life, but it has to be, you know, you have to set it up so it works for your running. I mean, particularly, and I think Chris talked about this as well, but you have to be able to adapt as well. It's not a case of blindly sticking to something. And obviously, as you get older, sometimes you get some chronic issues in terms of injuries, etc. You know, and there are certain things that you know to avoid because of that. I don't do as much work on the road anymore. I've replaced my kind of road interval session, which is a key session now, with the deep water session, you know, when I still do it, and so on. And I think the other thing that keeps you fresh is seeking out fresh challenges, and the mountain racing is a good example of that. You know, something to do it, you know, towards the end of their career that keeps you competitive at a world stage, and lets you see a bit of the world as well. It's not. Sometimes we're a bit insular in athletics, but you know, it's a really good opportunity to actually, you know, expand your horizons as a person and not just as an athlete. And you know, to me, that you meet loads and loads of people, you know, from all walks of life, all different types of backgrounds, and there's people that you see sometimes and you don't see again. You can come back and flit in and out of your life, but they've got that common kinship, if you like. So that's some of the things that I would say sort of have helped me stay in the sport. I'd just like to finish in terms of why we do it, you know, with a little quote here. When I was at school, I read this, and I found it actually. I think we did an English class, we did a set of short stories. There's a short story here called The Half Mile, which was actually, it was written, I was saying to Mike earlier, it says at the start, it was written in the far off days when the record time for the half mile, 800 metres, was 1:52, so that must have probably been pre-war, we reckon. And it's about a guy, it's a short story about a chap. In those days it was Oxford and Cambridge athletes dominated the sport, and in the regional events the Oxford and Cambridge Blues would turn up with their fancy clothes and wipe the floor in terms of racing. And it's about a guy who's a skilled worker I think he's a skilled worker in a pottery worker, yeah, skills craftsman in pottery works, who turns up, and his goal is to try and break 2 minutes for the half mile. And the short story is all the way through how he struggles with the Oxford and Cambridge Blues and their fancy kit and what they say to him and all the rest of it. And it goes through the race from start to finish. And the guy, and at the end of the race, the chap wins the race in 1:59.4 or something like that. He breaks the half mile. And there's just some great quotes that have always stuck with me, and they do answer that question of why we do it. You know, for example, a couple of quotes from the end of the short story. And the guy broke his 2 minutes, and other people congratulated him. You know, he came out to the ground, chatted with everybody he saw, discussed his race a dozen times, had 3 or 4 beers, spent a few